I had permission from NIU to use this material to build an app, and was curious if I could actually make it happen. But I wanted to make it more accessible and know that many people are accessing information on their phones, and so an app is really the way to go about making that more accessible.
You're listening to Speaking of Language, a podcast recorded at the Language Resource Center at Cornell University. Each week, we explore a topic related to language pedagogy and second language acquisition. This week on Speaking of Language,
Gregory Green of the Cornell Library talks about his Android app, Study Lao, and the inspiration behind its creation.
Welcome to a new episode of Speaking of Language. I'm Angelica Kramer, the director of the Language Resource Center at Cornell University.
And I'm Sam Lupowitz, the LRC's media manager. Ever wonder what it takes to develop a language app? Well, you're in luck. Today, we are speaking with Gregory Green, curator of the John M. Eccles Collection on Southeast Asia at the Cornell University Library.
Greg just so happened to develop an app called Study Lao, and we will hear all about it. Welcome to Speaking of Language, Greg.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Before we talk more about this app, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do at Cornell, what your background is, and your language experiences?
Sure. Yeah, I, as you introduced me, am the curator of the John M. Eccles Collection on Southeast Asia. And specifically within the collection, I mainly handle material from the mainland of Southeast Asia. So countries such as Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Myanmar, that area of the world. And so I am a collection development reference librarian, work with building the collection and also with helping people to access the material within the collection.
Mm-hmm. What languages do you speak?
I speak Lao best of all the languages. Lao is my best second language. Also Thai and Khmer. So very comfortable with Lao. Thai, I'm comfortable reading, not as comfortable speaking, and mainly that's because of its very close relationship with Lao, and so I really have to work on my accent when I speak Thai and make sure that I don't get the words mixed up that are sometimes have slightly different meanings between the two different languages. So I take a little more time thinking about what I'm saying in Thai, whereas I don't have to in Lao.
Sure.
And then Khmer is, I've studied that less than the others, but it's still, I can do all right, especially if I'm in Cambodia.
Well, how did your interest in Lao come about?
It was quite nothing intentional on my part. I volunteered when I was 19, so almost 30 years ago now, to serve as a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and was assigned to serve in the San Francisco Bay Area, and specifically with the Lao community that had recently immigrated to that area. And so I had a couple of months training in Utah, Provo, Utah, at the Missionary Training Center there, in the language and in just generally how to be a missionary. And then spent the rest of 2 years there in San Francisco, just learning the language and speaking with people day to day. And so got very comfortable speaking with people in that capacity.
Do you still use Lao right now on a regular basis?
I do. When I finished my missionary time, I went back to school. This was between, so I went my freshman year at Brigham Young University, then 2 years as a missionary, and then came back to school. When I got back to school, I had Lao friends there and eventually married one of those friends. Yes, my wife of now 24 years, is from Laos originally. She grew up. She moved to California when she was 10, and grew up there, but still speaks and reads the language. So we use it at home between us, and then also I use it professionally at work when I travel to Laos and need to work with materials from the country.
So, Greg, tell us more about this app that you developed. How does one even think about developing an app? How do you go about it? What does it entail? What are the steps?
Yeah, so the app was mainly built out of really a curiosity on my part. I had access to the material on the C site, the Southeast Asia Language and Culture site at Northern Illinois University, where I worked before coming to Cornell, and so I had permission from NIU to use this material to build an app, and was curious if I could actually make it happen. So the most of the material on Seasite at the time had not been updated for quite some time. Since then, they've updated a lot of it. But I wanted to make it more accessible and know that many people are accessing information on their phones. And so an app is really the way to go about making that more accessible by phone. And so I had no idea how to make an app. And so the first thing was a Google search, and how to do that. And it just happens that I have Android phones. And so that's what I started to look at first, was how do I develop an app for Android, simply because of my own convenience and preference there. And so that got me to the Android Studio development platform, which is what Google has produced to develop apps for Android. And so I spent a number of months just playing around with Android Studio, trying to figure out how to make a basic app. My first attempt failed miserably, and so I gave it up for a month or two, and then came back and finally figured out how to do it. A lot of instructions are available on YouTube, on different websites. So it was really a matter of just doing a lot of research and just using all of the information that's available out there. Tutorials just are everywhere.
What does the app entail? It's vocabulary training. What other materials are on there? Audio bits?
Yes, so it's roughly the equivalent of a first-year language course.
Okay.
So it gives introduction to the language, to the grammatical structure, to basic vocabulary that someone would learn at a first-year level. And then it has a series of conversations, lessons, you can call them. So there's, I believe, 30 lessons on there that have the written and recorded audio of native speakers who had been a part of the C-Site, the original website for the Lao language part of C-Site at NIU. And so it has that. I did update some of the material and added a little bit of my own in there for explanation. Mainly it comes from the material that's available on the C-Site.
And so you mentioned that you developed it for Android, since that's what you're most familiar with. Do you have any plans to port it over to Apple devices, or is that best left to other interested parties? What are you thinking?
I definitely did have plans, and I noted that in a number of places that I was planning on making an app that could be used for iPhone, but that has not happened. And so I looked at ways to port what I had done for Android over to Apple, and it just was going to be a little more complicated than I had time to deal with. Plus, I've had a little bit more responsibilities at it at work that have taken a lot of my time.
Sure.
And so it just never happened. I would love to see it happen, and if anybody wanted to help develop the iPhone app, then I would be happy to work with them. It's just that I don't know that I have the capacity to do that now.
Well, there you go. Speaking of language listeners, if anybody is interested in helping with this project, do let us know.
Yeah. On that note, did you have any plans also to add any more content or additional levels?
Level 1 Laos is where I'm sticking with now. I did want to add more reading material on there for people to have a little bit more supplementary information to go through, and just have not had the time to continue developing. That's, I think, common for these types of projects where you get interested in something and you put a lot of good effort into it, and then it just doesn't happen beyond the initial, okay, I completed step 1, and then there it is.
Yep.
Well,
we also
again,
need to figure out how to stop time, right? Or clone ourselves so we can take care of all the projects that we all have lined up here.
Exactly. And
true.
Interesting, while I was developing the app, the reason why I had a little bit of extra time is because we had adopted a puppy. And strange as that sounds, this puppy attached herself to me and decided that every day I should wake up and begin work at 4 a.m.
Oh my.
And so she would just bother me until I woke up, and I found myself with several hours in the morning with absolutely no interruptions. And so I could work on the app every morning for months at a time, without any sort of interruption. And she would sleep at my feet once she had me awake.
Nice.
So get a puppy if you want to build an app. It might help.
Perfect. So that is amazing advice for anybody who is interested in building an app or developing online materials like that. Do you have any other pieces of advice or suggestions for our listeners who are interested in diving into the developer realm?
One thing that I would have done different is look at many more of the existing apps for other languages, and to really play with those a lot more to see what was possible. I say that's one thing I would have done. It probably would have stopped me cold, and I would have realized that I could never develop an app on my own with all of the bells and whistles that come in many of the bigger language apps. And so I say, yeah, look at what's available and out there, but also sometimes it's good to just jump in and say, I want to develop something basic to get someone started on Lao, but I can't really add a lot of the wonderful bells and whistles that are out there in other apps. But it is a basic, it has the information you need to get started. But it isn't an incredibly exciting app, but it is there and available for you.
Well, and this is one of these languages where there aren't many materials out there. So I think it's wonderful that you actually took the time to work on this and make this publicly available. The materials that this is based on at Northern Illinois University, are those materials still available on their website as well?
Yes, they're still available on their website. They do have a few more supplemental materials available there. So it was definitely worth going and looking at what they have there. It's the C site, SEASITE at NIU.edu. And so it's definitely something to look at for more material on the language. And they have a lot of cultural material up there as well that the app does not include.
Great. And then anybody who does have an Android device, we invite you to go to Google Play and look for Study Lao. And then everybody with an Apple device, please let us know if you want to port that material over.
So before we sign off, we'd like to ask you to share your favorite word in a language you speak, love, or are learning. What is that favorite word of yours?
My favorite word is nguak.
Say that again?
Nguak. This is a Lao word for a sort of a river monster, not really a river monster, but a large snake that lives in the rivers. You won't not a name for a real snake, but it is my favorite word because it's something that indicated to me that I had finally gotten it. If I could say that word, then I suddenly, I finally got Lao, because it incorporates a lot of what is difficult for an English speaker to speak Lao. So it's got the starting NG consonant, so ngu, ngao, and then it has the ua vowel, which is difficult for us. And then it ends. It has the high falling tone ngua, and then the hard stop, glottal stop at the end. So it's really once I figured out how to say that one, then I realized that maybe I can actually learn this language. And since then, I've never forgotten kind of that moment.
That's wonderful. Great. Well, thanks so much for speaking of language with us today, Greg.
All right. Thank you for inviting me.
Next week, we have a Thanksgiving special in store for you.
Be sure to tune in and reflect on all the things to be grateful for.
Until then,
Auf Wiederhören!
The Language Resource Center is located on the ground floor of Stimson Hall on Cornell's main campus in Ithaca, New York. Check us out on the web at lrc.cornell.edu or look for Cornell LRC on Facebook and Twitter.
Speaking of Language is produced by Angelica Kramer and Sam Lupowitz.
recorded by Sam Lupowitz.
Original music by Sam Lupowitz, Dan Gable, and Joe Gibson.
Thanks also to the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell University.
As a reminder, the ideas and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the College of Arts and Sciences or any other official entity of Cornell University.
We thank our listeners, and do stay tuned for our next episode.